Welcome to the Sisterhood of the Rose podcast. I am your co-host, Lily,
And I'm your co-host, Jess.
and we're just coming on today for a casual chat. Me and Jess just recently had a meetup where we did a lot of collaborating, a lot of work to get our podcast off the ground, and we really just wanted to give you guys a little bit of the inside scoop on what it means for us, at least, to collaborate on this level. And, we're friends, but we're also business partners. And so we kind of wanted to give a little insight into what that looks like for us and what we are learning about our own processes and our processes together. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. We're just going to let it flow, kind of dive into it, and we'll see where it leads. We have a lot that we could talk about. It was a long weekend. We had a 4-day weekend together. So that's what we're going to go into.
Yeah, it was just kind of like what Lily said. It was really illuminating, I feel like, for both of us. And, I went and I visited Lily where she lives in northern Idaho. And so it was beautiful there. Oh my goodness. And a place that I've been because I went to college near there. So it was really cool to go back, but also just to see Lily's life. Because Lily and I are, when we decided to co-host, we had actually never met in person. And so now we've met in person twice. And the first time was just Lily coming to visit me where I live in Texas for my birthday. And this was really the first time that, me coming to her and like we were really getting in that collaborative energy. And I think both of us were just kind of like, I know for me, I had certain expectations that I didn't realize I had of like, okay, we need to get this done. We need to get this done. We need to get this done. And for me, it like took away. I'm like, okay, it just took away from my ability to be like fully present and in the moment, which is something that Lily really brings to the table. Like she's so in the moment, and that's something that I love about her. And she kind of like brings me back because I'm a manifesting generator in human design, and I go quick in my process. And Lily's a generator, and she slows me down, but like in a good way. And it's like learning how to marry those two processes. Like I feel like I feel like we're learning that, and it's been really cool to see. And this trip was like, we had some bumps in the road, but we also had some like really beautiful moments of collaboration that, yeah, I mean, at one point we were trying to find our trailer, and our song, and we were trying to create our trailer, and we weren't really collaborating. Like we were just trying to get things done, I felt like, and we weren't collaborating. And then the next day we had like over 2 hours, I think, where we were like re-recording our trailer. We were trying to find music, and it was just like not working. And by the end of it, we were both drained, and we were like, let's just stop. And then the next day, Lily just looks at me and she's like, okay, we need to talk about this. Like, we need to actually talk.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And if you guys don't know, like, if you've never hosted a podcast, I mean, I didn't know this before, but there is a lot that goes into the back end of things. And that's really why we wanted to get together, because Jess has the experience and I don't. And so Jess was, for the most part, spearheading a lot of the processes and leading the way when it comes to what needs to get done. And, I'm new to podcasting. Jess has had her own show. So I was definitely in the learner seat for a lot of it, but there's a lot that goes into it. I kept saying this throughout the trip, but it's so different than running a business, because with my business, I started my business and then, you know, you can change it and just morph as you go, and you can, launch new things and bring new ideas. But with the podcast, it's kind of like you're formulating a finished product and then you present it to your audience. And then obviously it continues to morph as you do, but you really have a solid foundation. And so there is a lot of back end work that needs to go into creating a podcast. And it was so great that we were able to do it together, because honestly, it's just so much more motivating to work in person, at least in my opinion, where we can like stop and have fun, or, like morph the trip into not just, quote unquote work, but also doing other things. And to be honest, I feel like all the stuff that we were doing is fun. However, like there is a level of stress involved when you just can't get the trailer right. You know what I mean? You just like can't get it. And you're just like recording and recording and recording again. And that's kind of what we did, you know? We're just so you guys better listen to our trailer, honestly. If you guys don't listen to our trailer, it's right at the top. You can click on it, you can listen to it. It's great. We really did it, but it did take some time, and we had kind of a space to ourselves where we were recording. And as Jess was saying, you know, it's not just the even the wording of it, but it's also the music choice. And I could tell that Jess was like a little stressed about the music choice. And I was like, okay, great. I'm going to spearhead the music choice because I feel like that's kind of like fun. And I'm like kind of new to this. And Jess has been through the process of like finding music before. And it can kind of feel like a little bit of a needle in a haystack idea. But I would say we found it like relatively quickly, like in the grand scheme. Like, yeah, we were looking for a couple hours, I would say. But on the second day, we found the music. We found like a couple tracks that we really liked. So we were kind of honing in. And then we ended up choosing one song, feeling really good about it. And then the following day, I was feeling, we listened to it and I was like, oh no, because I didn't like it anymore. Not, okay, I take that back. I didn't not like it, but I didn't feel as excited about it as I had when we first chose it, you know? And Jess admitted that she was feeling similarly. And so, you know, we went through the process of changing our music, and we're just sharing this to kind of illustrate the process a little bit to you and kind of share what it means to go into the collaborative process with someone who does like operate differently, because me and Jess do operate differently, and yet, you know, have the patience to be in the creation. Because as Jess was saying, when we were really collaborating, that's when we started really getting somewhere. We were pulling some cards from our decks and just kind of like getting into it. And that's when things felt really juicy to me.
Oh my gosh, same. It was like we started like we just started having like a conversation. Like we put everything away. We put our computers down, we put our phones down, and we just like looked at each other and we were just like grab the decks and grabbed the decks and we were just like, okay, let's talk about like who are we talking to? Who's our audience? All these things. And we got really clear with each other. We used conversation to like find clarity, I feel like, on and also the cards were so just on point. And but then like the cards that we drew, we started talking about them and we were like, well, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for you? And it immediately just brought us to like we completely rewrote our trailer, and it was just like when we hear it we're both just like, oh, like it's yes, it's a yes. And both of us are sacral beings, and like we both know what it feels like to have a sacral yes. And like there were many moments throughout the weekend when we were both getting no's, but there were like a few moments where we were both like yes. And that's what we were waiting for, was like the full body yes. And I do feel like, you know, we got that initially with the first song that we chose, but then as Lily mentioned, her intuition was really nudging her that it wasn't the right pick. And so she brought it up to me. And initially I was like, well, no, we're already on this path. Like I wanted, you know, we already, and then I was like sitting there and I was like, okay, but actually I think you're right. And like, it just goes to show for anyone listening, if you're ever working with anyone or not even working with anyone, I think just interacting with someone, if you're feeling like you like something some way is the right way but you don't want to say it because like you're afraid of what the other person is going to think, chances are the other person is feeling the same thing and maybe just doesn't want to say it or just isn't as in tune with it. And so, you know, I'm really grateful to Lily for bringing that up, because now it's like we changed our song and our song is like it's just so much more resonant. And so that was a really big learning process, I think, for both of us. And it's just, I feel like opened up this like way of communicating with each other of like, okay, you know, we can shift and we can change. And I think that that's the beauty of creation is it's not linear. And it's like we're taught that so many things need to be linear, and we're conditioned that it's like it needs to be linear. And I find myself operating in that way a lot. And creation is just like so not that way. And I
No.
think that that's what was really coming up was like just letting it come, letting it move, letting it flow, having no expectations of like how far we're going to get, and letting it just come to fruition in the way that it will. And I think that that's the big lesson that I took away was like when you're working with someone and you're collaborating with someone, like you really can't have expectations of like what the outcome is going to be and like what the production is going to look like. Like, yeah, definitely like you have to stick to some sort of schedule. But I think that for me, just realizing like, just let myself be in the creation of it. And that is going to allow for the best possible outcome. That was like a really big takeaway for me.
Mm. Yeah, I love that because I think that's so intrinsic to the generator quality and the manifesting generator quality, because you're also a generator, is being in that creative flow. And it's like so much can come from that. I also want to mention something that I learned about the song choice and kind of piggybacks on what Jess was saying, but I'm going to off kind of tangent on that too. I am, if you follow me on Instagram, if you know me at all, I am quite intuitive, and yet I sometimes overthink my intuition, and sometimes my apprehension to rock the boat kind of is hard for me to manage sometimes. And so, as Jess was saying, something that I've learned too, through the process is honoring myself in a timely way. So it's like creates more struggle for me to not listen to my intuition and then kind of kick the can down the road. And then, it's the most ideal for all parties to honor the intuition in the moment. And I can really sympathize, with people who kind of like are like me in some sense where the overthinking drops in immediately after the intuitive hit drops in, and a lot of that comes from not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to derail the process, or be the person who slows things down. And so I just want to offer that as kind of a takeaway for me too, as something that might be helpful for all of you listening who, everyone's intuitive, so it applies to everybody. But one other thing that I learned in the process, very interesting, and my spirit team, guides, however you want to call it, will be talking about spiritual things on this podcast, obviously. So whenever I say guide, spirit team, you can refer to it in whatever way works for you, universe, God, source, whatever. So one thing that I've been working through with my guides is trusting myself above all other things. And that even means signs. So I received some signs about the name of our song. And they were external to me, right? So there were signs in my external world that kind of I observed and then like built a story on them, as we do with signs. And something that I learned that I don't even think I mentioned to Jess was about following myself over anything else. And, when I listened to the song back 24 hours later and it didn't hit right, immediately one of the things was like, but we were guided to this song. Like, we were guided to this song. So, like, why not? And then a part of me was just like, I don't care. I don't like it anymore. And that's what it means to be a co-creator right there. And I mean, we can take all the guidance in the world. And the thing is, I truly don't believe that the universe ever tries to trick us or anything like that. But I do think that the universe sets us up to, sets us up with challenges that will initiate us into our greatest expansion. And if that means, observing things in your environment and having to choose between the environment and yourself, then I could see how people might think that that's like the universe tricking you. But I don't ever think of the universe as being in a tricky energy ever. I always think it's for my highest and best. That's just how I choose to look at it. But it really it really made me stop and think too, because I was like, I was actually in the shower and I was like, but we were guided to this song. And then I was like, oh, I don't care. Like, I don't care. It's not a no. It's a no for me now. And we have to honor that, you know? And Jess is in the same boat. And so just another kind of takeaway for me, along the theme of, knowing myself, trusting myself.
Oh my God, I had to like bite my tongue to not be like, yes. Like that was such a good point to bring up because we were guided to that song, like very, very much so. And both of our sacrals gave us a full body yes to it in the moment. And I think that's what was so confusing to both of us is like, we were both like, but what the fuck? Like our sacrals said yes, but then for whatever reason, just a reminder that like a sacral response is always in the moment and like the moment is always changing.
Mm.
And I really think that and like I was telling Lily, I was like, okay, this is a lesson for me because I'm an emotional authority in human design and like I don't make decisions in the moment in my everyday life. And in that moment, like I allowed myself to make a decision in the moment. And I was like, this is also a lesson for me. Like I feel like I almost feel like I was being taught like, hey, this is what happens when you don't listen to your emotional
Mm.
authority and give yourself time. And then I
Mm.
also feel like when you were saying, Lily, how we were guided to it, because I almost feel like we were guided to it to have that experience with each other where like we needed to learn because like that experience brought like a really open dialogue, like open but uncomfortable dialogue between the two of us of like, hey, okay, like this is how I operate, this is how I operate. Like, how can we um be more effective moving forward in our processes so that we make decisions that are for the highest like outcome of the podcast, but that also like honor our processes because I feel like both of us were not really honoring our processes fully in that, and not intentionally, like we were just going through it. And yeah, I almost feel like that it's like, yeah, we were guided to it but for a different reason than like what we thought.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. And that's like such a common misconception about following your intuition is that if your intuition leads you one place, that it'll never change. But it can change. Like you can be guided to one place and your intuition says yes and your body says yes. And then the next day it doesn't. And that's okay. And that's something that's been hard for me to kind of grasp because like mentally, like it's kind of like a mind fuck, like a game, because it's like, wait, was I wrong?
Yeah,
Not really. Like maybe you misinterpreted your signals internally, but there's actually a much higher probability that you were guided to that and then you got there and then it's like, okay, that step is over now. We're guiding to another thing or whatever it was. And in this situation, I think that's such a good representation of that, of being guided into something for a purpose and then honoring ourselves in terms of what felt right led us to the next step.
absolutely. And I think like I'm just really grateful that I have someone that I'm working with that operates in that way too, because yeah, I'm like you. I'm learning how to be like, okay, but I got guidance for this, or like a healer told me this in a session. And it's like, that's where it goes back to what Lily said about like, no, but like you're the co-creator. Like how many times do we hear that in the spiritual space? It's like, you're the co-creator, you're the co-creator. Sometimes I'm like, okay, like, but what the fuck does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck does that mean? And it's like what Lily said. It's like, okay, she was like in the shower, she's like, okay, but we were guided to that. I don't care. I don't like the song anymore. So I'm gonna change it. You know what I mean? It's like that's just like one minor detail. It's almost like me, I had a beautiful session with a healer, a few weeks ago. And Lily knows about this. And she told me not to do something significant in my life. And I was like, because it was guidance, right? Like she was saying that that's what my spirit team was telling me, whatever. And I sat there afterwards and I was like, I'm going to do it anyways. Like that does not feel good for me. right now, and like at the end of the day, like this is my life. And yeah, that's a no for me. And I think that that's like something that's very important to notice and to bring forth, especially in the spiritual space, because I have had so many times where I've had like healers tell me something and I just like take it and run with it. And it's like, okay, how many times are we like coming out of sessions and being like, okay, but what actually resonated with me? Like what actually felt good in that? And
Mm-hmm.
what didn't? And that's something that like I feel like Lily and I are really both initiating ourselves into that leadership in our life. Like
Yeah.
that's what we want to do with this podcast is like we want everyone listening to like really feel like they have leadership in their life. And
Mm-hmm.
not to say that Lily and I are perfect in this way, because like I'm far from perfect in this way, and I'm still really learning, but this is just like these are just some examples of that. And, you know, I'm sure we'll continue to share as things like that come up. But it takes courage and honesty to really like look at certain things and be like, okay, but like what like let yourself be your guide. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was a really good point that you brought up.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love what you said about that, because like the co-creator piece is just like so huge for me this year.
Mhm.
And it's like, don't stay in line with something that doesn't feel right because you got guidance to do it, you know? I mean, if we're overthinking everything, like we have to have something. And at the end of the day, it's like, does it feel right? You know, like, and I feel like that's really hard for me, because I'm like, oh, is my trauma showing up, is my trigger showing up, like, am I resisting this, you know? Like there's a lot of different concepts in the spiritual space that I think can like get kind of clogged in our filters of what feels right. And I mean, one thing I'll say about that is like the most empowered I've ever felt in my life was when I've taken action without guidance,
Mm.
and like leaps, you know, quote unquote leaps, but are they really, if it's just what feels right, you know? And I think there's like definitely, I mean, we're receiving guidance all the time. I'm receiving guidance all the time. Jess is too. Everyone on this show, listening to the show, is receiving guidance all the time. Um, but you know, it gets back to like the very crux of like what spirituality is. It's like we're all part of source. Like our spirit team is like part of us. Like we're all connected. And so yeah, that song situation was just one of the times where I was like able to step into my empowerment, and ultimately that's what the sign was there for, you know, like that's the whole point of receiving the sign around the other song, was for me to step into empowerment. And so it's just like you can't outsmart or outthink the universe. It's just you just have to be in the moment and like trust yourself. And I know I say that like it's like, oh yeah, just do that. And I understand, you know, everyone's like rolling their eyes. I'm rolling my eyes because it's not always the easiest thing. We don't feel like it's the easiest thing. But it is such an important, it's just so important. Like the leadership piece. And yeah, that's really what I want to bring to this podcast. That's what we want to bring to this podcast, is that empowerment into leadership. And you know, something that I was working on with a healer that I really trust and love recently was around this piece where it's like, you know, giving our power away to whatever it is that we connect to, you know, and it's really supposed to be at its crux, like the co-creation, you know, like creating with help. It's not that we have to like go, you know, charging off into the unknown by ourselves necessarily, but it is this piece of stepping into responsibility.
Yeah, so beautifully said. So
Mm-hmm.
beautifully said. And I think that just overall, you know, the trip of me going to Lily and us getting ready to launch this, you know, like Lily said, launching a podcast is it's not a small thing. And I think that it really just felt like a really big initiation for both of us almost, but in ways that I think we weren't expecting. And I think that that's why we wanted to talk about this in this episode, because we were just like, let's just talk about like what it's been like to collaborate and what that looks like, and like the almost like the realness of it, because we hit some road bumps. We had some conflict, and we had to like learn how to navigate that. You know what I mean? We had to acknowledge when each other's triggers were coming up, and how do you move through that, and taking responsibility for certain things. It's not an easy thing to do in any type of relationship. But I think when you're able to like really just put your ego aside, like speaking for me, um, just like putting my ego aside and being like, hey, I am like not just trying, I don't want to be right or wrong in this situation. I just want to take responsibility for it. That's all. Because that's all I can do. And move forward. And how can we do that? And like showing up to the I think any relationship in that way, it's not easy. It's something that I'm still learning in like my personal relationships and everything too, but just really taking away the like need to be right, and just like honestly looking at like your actions and being like, okay, what was that? Like what was I acting out of, you know? And like I'm speaking for me here. I'm not speaking for Lily, but it's just like that was like a big lesson for me of just being like, you know what? Like uh, that's just how what happened, and I'm taking responsibility, and I want to move forward, and this is where my heart's at, and like how do you feel, you know? And like I think the strongest like relationships in general are able to do that. Like, and not just like shove, like push things under the rug, and like not want things to be awkward and
Yeah.
what. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes you need to address the truth. And you also need to realize that like we're all human, and like we're all going to show up in ways that like we're not the most proud of. And we may just, you know, just be imperfect. And like the ability to navigate that, I think, is a life skill that like I'm still developing. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think that that was just like for me, that was a really big theme for the weekend. And I think that it's just something that's important to talk about, and just kind of like the realness behind, you know, a partnership in any capacity.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true because it's just so much more than a friendship. Like, you won't have nearly as many issues with a friend that you will with a friend who's also a business partner. It's just how it goes. You know, like you're making executive decisions together, you're making judgment calls, and there's just bound to be times when you don't agree. And so we can be as like-minded as in as literally possible, and it's still going to come up. And so yeah, it's like it's definitely like I've always seen kind of like this like stepping up for both of us visually around this. And yeah, it's like what, you know, for me, like I really value, you know, like Jess and our partnership. And as challenges come up, something that's like guiding me as well as like what am I going to be proud of? Like how can I like treat this relationship, this podcast, this experience as special, not something that is just like, you know, we're doing this and whatever, you know. And so like for me, that's something that I want to like sink into as much as I can, like through this whole process and through launching episodes weekly, and, you know, just like being in that energy. Not to say that everything has to be like a sacred experience, you know, but just that energy feels good, especially when we're together, you know, because it's not going to be often that Justin and I can actually like get together because we do live like quite far apart, unfortunately. But we do have we really want to make it a priority to like be together in person, because I mean, the magic just happens in person. Like that's how I feel. Like it just does. And we want to record together, and we have plans for that. So we're excited, we're happy, we are moving, we're moving in this, and we're so glad that you're here with us. And we hope that you got something out of this podcast. I'm sure that we'll have similar conversations in the future because we hit on some really big theme topics that I know we're going to keep coming back to in terms of the self leadership and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I'm just really happy to share this with you and give you kind of an intimate window into what it really means to build something with someone and a little bit of, window into our process.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so we just wanted that's really it. Like we just wanted to
Yeah.
talk like what do we talk about today? We were like, we just want to talk about collaboration. Like we kind of feel like that's not something that's talked about a lot. And one of our intentions with this podcast is to really bring through authenticity in a way that is really representative of our processes. And so that's what we wanted to do today. And that's what we'll continue to do moving forward. And we're going to talk about all the things, like not just, the collaboration, but we're going to talk about more about human design. We're going to talk about more about astrology. And like, you guys are probably going to hear us talk about all these things, like just very organically.
Yeah.
We're not really here to like explain to you like what human design is and all of that stuff. We're here to more just be like, yeah, this is how we're living it. And so, yeah, we're just bringing you guys along for the journey.
Yeah, like we could have gotten so deep into how our human designs even showed up when we were together. And I think that would be a great kind of, a follow-up episode to this because Jess is currently moving through her own like study in terms of human design and she knows so much already. So I know she's going to be bringing her expertise to the table and I personally can't wait to hear them. So I hope you guys are excited too. And I think that, there's a lot of human design information out there, but what we really want to bring in astrology, right, is just what it means to kind of implement those things, kind of like the next level. So we hope that that resonates for you, and it's definitely something that we are excited to share.
Yeah, embodiment is a big piece of the podcast that we want to bring forth, and that I want to challenge myself. Like I want to challenge myself to embody certain things. And so, yeah, we're going to do it.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in today. We can't wait to meet you in our next episode.